A pleasant day, my dear students. Welcome to our literature class. I am your teacher, Teacher Giselle Figueroa. So, for today's lesson or discussion, we are going to have a short story about Rip Van Winkle. Anyone who knows or familiar about this story, you can raise your hand. Okay, Miss Joy Cavite.
It's a familiar story, ma'am.
Okay, great. Maybe if I will show you the next slide, you can recall who Mr. Rip Van Winkle is, okay? So let's have the second slide. How about that? Anyone? Do you know the story or do you have any background about who Mr. Rip Van Winkle is? It's very famous story.
Yes, ma'am. I know that. I think he's the lazy one they're saying. I do think.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, that's correct. I'm going to give you a point for that. Thank you. So let's move on to our discussion for today. So first, let's get to know the background of Rip Van Winkle, the short story. So the author of this short story is Washington Irving. Rip Van Winkle is a short story written by the American author, yes, as I have said, Washington Irving, and it was published in 1819. So it has been a long time ago since it was published. And the story was originally published as part of a collection called The Sketchbook of the Geoffrey Crayon Gent. The story was written while Irving was living in Birmingham, England. The story was one of the biggest success of the collection seen and has since been adopted into plays and etc. All right. So as you know, yeah, Rip Van Winkle is a very famous one. So I'm going to give you the summary of this story, and I would love and I would appreciate if you will listen to me thoroughly. For we are going to have the activities later on. So yeah, so let's get started with the story. The story tells the tale of a kindly but lazy man named Rip Van Winkle, who lives in a small village at the foot of the Catskill Mountain in New York. Rip is constantly henpecked by his nagging wife and takes to hunting with his dog all day in the mountains in order to avoid danger. So, as you can see, Rip Van Winkle loves going to the mountain to avoid his nagging wife. Alright, next. One day, Rip Van Winkle realizes that he has accidentally gone further up the mountain than he ever has before. And as he is heading down again, he is happened upon by a small man carrying a very large keg on his shoulders. Anyone, do you know what keg is?
No.
Yes, as you can see in the picture, it's like a barrel. It's like a container for liquor or alcoholic drinks. Okay? So the man beckons to Rip Van Winkle, and Rip Van Winkle helps him carrying the keg through the mountain to a party filled with other small men who were playing nine pin. Do you know what nine pin is?
I
Or
don't
do you have any
even know,
idea?
ma'am.
All right, nine pin is like a game. It's similar to bowling. The pin and bowling. Yeah, it's similar. The mechanics of the game is similar to bowling. And yeah, there are small men's, or we can call them the dwarfs, that Winkle saw in the top of the mountain. So the men are quiet and seem to be suspicious. But Rip Van Winkle begins to relax and drink some beer from the keg. Soon, Rip Van Winkle begins to feel quite drunk and falls asleep. And when he awakes, the men have vanished. So Rip Van Winkle partied all day with these dwarfs or this little man, and then as soon as he get drunk, he fall asleep, and then when he wakes up, no one is there. Nobody is there. So let's see what happened next. Rip Van Winkle descends the mountain to return to his town. So he goes down from the hill and get back to his hometown and finds that rather than sleeping on the mountain overnight, as he supposed, he has actually slept or he has been asleep for 20 years. So everything he knew of in the town is gone. So all the people, the familiar faces that he used to know was gone. While he while he was asleep, the Revolutionary War took place in Rip Van Winkle's place, and he thought that a free citizen of the United States changed, and eventually Rip Van Winkle is reunited with his daughter, and eventually he lives in her house with her. And so on as the days goes by, he spends his days sitting outside of the local inn and telling his story to whoever will listen to him. So as you can see in the picture, he was very shook for the things that he saw in this town is in his hometown. And yeah, fortunately he was able to meet his daughter, and he continues to pass on the story about the dwarfs. All right. Did you like the story about Mr. Rip Van Winkle?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. So for our activity, we are going to have a mind mapping activity. So here's how to create a mind mapping. Oh, by the way, do you have any ideas how to make a mind map? Have you done it before?
Yes, it's um branches
Mm-hmm.
of a specific idea or a specific person, like that.
All right, thank you for that answer. So, mind maps helps us to get the ideas and put it in a one context and get the main idea easily. So that is what you're going to do for this activity. You have to analyze how and why individuals in the sad stories, the Rip Van Winkle and ideas, and of course the characters. You will going to focus with the character and do the mind mapping, okay? So I will be giving you 5 minutes for this activity. You may start now. Okay, your 5 minutes is up. So may we call on the first presenter, Joy Cavite, and present your work, please.
Um, Good day, ma'am. I'm Joy Cavite from BSSE, and this is my mind map for the Rip Van Winkle story. So, as you can see, I've put four different main concepts about the story, which is the context, about the author, the themes, and the characters of the Rip Van Winkle. So let's first this I will first discuss about the context, which is nostalgia and change and the European influence. As you can see, nostalgia and change because Rip Van Winkle was written during the Dutch era, and it was a time where the inhabitants knew and repeated tall tales about the original Dutch settlers. And under the English, settlements became more populous as waves of English and immigrants arrived. For the European influence, Washington Irving, who is the author of the story, traveled in Europe from 1804 to 1806, particularly in Liverpool, England, and in Spain, and returned to England in 1815 to manage the the European part of his family's business. So there he wrote the first draft of his sketchbook of Geoffrey Crayon Gent, and Rip Van Winkle is part of the sketchbook. Next is about the themes. First is the freedom versus tyranny. Irving conveys the theme of freedom versus tyranny throughout the story. Rip Van Winkle seeks nothing more than the freedom to be his kind, simple self and to live the idle life he wants to live. His freedom and good nature endear him to his fellow villagers, whom he is happy to help and to pass the time with. And for the tyranny, there are different types of tyranny impinged on Rip to constrain his freedom. The most obvious tyrannical force is his wife, as she nags him constantly and ferociously to work on their farm and support his family. Next is the characters. First character is of course Rip Van Winkle, which is the protagonist of the story. He is a genial, passive man living in a small Dutch province in the Catskills. And he spends his time engaging in work that is not useful for his family. Next is next is Dame Van Winkle. Dame Van Winkle's wife is Rip Dame Van Winkle is Rip Van Winkle's wife, who is a sharp-tongued and nagging woman whose only role in the story is to antagonize and hound her lazy husband, who avoids all domestic duties. Next is Rip Van Winkle Jr., the son of the protagonist, Rip Van Winkle, and Dame Van Winkle. Rip Jr. is determined to grow up to be just like his father. And next is Derek Van Pommel. He is a schoolmaster, an educated and articulate man who eagerly participates in earnest discussions of the news contained in old, outdated newspapers with other townspeople at the inn. Next is Nicholas Vedder. He is the landlord of the old inn who sits all day in the shade of a large tree and who speaks very little. Lastly, the Henrik Hudson, or the crew of the Half Moon. Hudson was a 17th century explorer of the New York metropolitan region and the most famous for sailing up the Hudson River, and which now takes his name now, the Hudson River. And next is lastly for the last concept, the author about Rip Van Winkle. Rip Van Winkle, no, Washington Irving rather. Washington Irving is an American author and he published The Rip Van Winkle, which is part of the collection of his The Sketchbook of Geoffrey Crayon Gent. And the story was published in 1819 and the story was written of well the story was written by Irving when he was still living in Birmingham, England. So that's it for my man map, teacher Giselle. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joy Cavite, for the very well organized presentation of yours. I would love to give a commendation about your work. I love the way you put bullets in each parts of it and then you discuss it thoroughly. And I can see that you really understood the discussion earlier because you were able to trim down and break down each part of it, and that's a very job well done for you. All right, I think that sums up for our discussion for today. Thank you for attending my lesson, and I hope you learned something new today. That's all for our literature class. Again, I am Giselle Figueroa.
And I'm Joy Cavite. Thank you for
Thank you for
watching.
watching.
Bye.